Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. I hope you guys are having a great day so far. Please like, share, and subscribe. Attending some of the days of Lori Daybell's trial for the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, was fascinating on so many levels. The biggest thing for me was how much I learned about the overall case from true crime aficionados who followed it since the beginning, and from some people tied to Lori Daybell. I met a family member. I met one of Lori's neighbors from Arizona who lived next to her for 10 years. That lady described her as a really nice, fun neighbor, someone you'd never imagine could be capable of what Lori did to her two youngest children, JJ and Tylee, to Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, and to Charles Vallow. And let's not forget Brandon Boudreaux, thankfully was not injured, but whose life was definitely threatened. I heard Lori's brother, Adam Cox, who testified for the state at this trial, say on another YouTube channel that even though it may be hard to believe, Lori at one time was a nice person. Adam, if you saw him testify, was either unable or unwilling to answer Lori's question, "When did you last spend time with me?" Adam danced around that query before Lori nailed him down to a time in 2018 when they were together in her kitchen. He didn't give her the satisfaction of saying how memorable her green chili chicken enchiladas were, because apparently they were not memorable. And in fact, her son Colby said they were made with canned chicken sauce in a jar and they were, quote, disgusting. But Adam was really pushed into a corner when asked that question, and it was weird. You'd think that he would have remembered the last time he saw Lori, especially after learning about the crimes that she was accused of and then convicted of. When a family member is accused of unaliving another family member, wouldn't you go back over every detail of what happened in the months leading up to that incident? I know I would. Adam was really cagey about that time. One person I spoke to said that Adam's reluctance to answer that question may be because this person I spoke to, strongly suspects that one, Lori and her other brother, Alex, the family annihilator, likely caused the death of Lori's third husband, Joe Ryan. Joe's death was listed as occurring on April 3rd of 2018, but nobody really knows exactly when he died, and that's because he was deceased in his new Phoenix apartment for many days before someone there noticed a distinctive and very unpleasant scent and then went inside to do a welfare check. From the degree of decomposition, it was obvious that Joe had passed away days earlier. In fact, Joe's sister, Annie Cushing, has written that when the authorities were moving Joe's body, it basically imploded. There was blood everywhere on the bed. This person I spoke to also believes it's quite possible that other people in the Cox family may know that Lori and Alex did indeed cause Joe's death, allegedly. Lori probably worked her family to the point where they despised Joe Ryan. Ryan, despite giving his name to Colby and despite moving to Phoenix to be close to Tylee, was not always fun to be around. He had a rage, apparently, that sometimes exploded in outbursts. Annie admits this about Joe. Joe and his siblings were removed from their parents' home and placed in foster care as children. It sounds like Joe and Annie, too, endured horrific abuse in their birth family home and in foster care. And that could definitely lead to depression and sadness, which then can lead to rage. And let's not forget that Lori's children, Colby and Tylee, accused Joe of SA, although Tylee admitted even at the young age of 3 that she was coaxed by Colby and Charles Vallow to say that about her father. It is entirely possible that some of Lori's family members know more about Joe Ryan's sudden death than they've admitted to. If they do know more, it may be that they're afraid of being charged because they did not go to the cops at the time. This is pure speculation at this point. However, there are some things that point to Joe Ryan maybe being Lori's first victim. 1. Alex Cox attacked Joe with a taser outside the building in Travis County, Texas, where Joe had just enjoyed a supervised visit with Tylee. Alex allegedly threatened to unalive Joe at the time of the attack.
Fox 10 obtained court documents from 2007 in Travis County, Texas. Police say Alex Cox used a stun gun on Joseph Ryan before threatening to kill him. Ryan had just exchanged his daughter Tylee with her mom Lori Vallow. The detective on the case said Ryan feared for his life. Cox would be sentenced to 90 days in jail after pleading guilty to aggravated assault.
This is a true story. I found out that my ex-brother-in-law was a pedophile, so I took a stun gun and I discharged it right in his nutsack. And I did. And in Texas, that's a felony. I'm thinking, maybe I'll get a handshake or a parade or something. I got probation.
Joe sustained serious injuries from that attack, and he definitely feared for his life. That attack occurred in 2007. 2. Lori was the only next of kin that the medical examiner's office had listed at the time of Joe's death. She never returned any of their calls. She also never notified Annie of Joe's passing, even though they'd been friends since 2002. And Lori had Annie's contact info. There was no funeral for Joe. It was only after another family member was contacted by a funeral home more than a month after Joe died that Annie and her siblings learned about Joe's death, and by then the body had been cremated. So there was no possibility of having a more in-depth autopsy and toxicology testing. It's very sus that Lori didn't call Annie after finding out about Joe's death. In addition, there were some strange objects in Joe Ryan's apartment in Phoenix that were captured in photos of the scene, namely a pair of women's sunglasses that looked very similar to ones that Lori wore. Also, Joe appeared to be in the process of coloring his hair because the hair dye box was open. The dye was mixed and ready to go in the bathroom. So why did he prepare all that and then end up on his bed without having colored his hair? It doesn't make sense. 3. Lori received the bulk of Joe's life insurance money to the tune of more than $62,000, and of course, Tylee then qualified for Social Security benefits and money. She went on to receive around $1,900 a month. So perhaps during Adam Cox's conversation with Lori in her kitchen in 2018, maybe they talked about Joe Ryan's death. Maybe. Could that be why he was so cagey about answering when he'd last seen her? I mean, no one probably wants to admit to something like that. And I feel that Adam Cox is one of the few heroes in this whole sad story because he dared to go against his family when trying to stage an intervention to discuss his concerns about Lori's scary new religious ideas, her belief in light and dark spirits and a scale that Chad Daybell came up with, her telling Adam that she was morphing into a translated being who could never die, and somebody who didn't need to repent. And Adam ended up a pariah in his birth family for many years after that. He tried to help Charles, but unfortunately, Adam's idea of an intervention in which he would gather with Lori and his family around a dinner table versus Charles' idea of getting Lori's temple recommend revoked and getting her into a facility for an in-depth mental health evaluation were perhaps very different. It's like they didn't each understand one another and what this intervention was going to look like. And I don't think Adam was really high on the idea of getting Lori's temple recommend revoked because that would be considered a very evil thing to do within the Cox family. And we know that no intervention took place because Charles was unalived before that could happen. Lori found out about the intervention, and that seems to have prompted the quick unaliving of Charles the next day. So somebody in Lori's family was told about the intervention ahead of time. And I'm thinking it might have been Adam, because he thought it was going to be a discussion around the dinner table. Maybe he didn't have the same notion that Charles did. And then whoever Adam told maybe told Lori, or told another family member who then told Lori. We know that Lori's mother, Janice, and her sister, Summer, and her niece, Melanie Boudreaux, were all doing surveillance on Adam and his son, Zach, during that 3-day period. Of course, it's impossible to know if Lori's family ever envisioned her conspiring with Alex to actually unalive Charles. Maybe they thought that would never happen. Although if they did know about Joe Ryan, then they should have had an inkling, in my opinion. Another reason why I believe Lori and Alex likely played a role in Joe Ryan's death is that, according to Annie Cushing, Charles' sister Kay Woodcock told her that she knows they, meaning, presuming, I think, Lori and Alex, unalived her brother Joe Ryan. However, this comment was made in passing when Kay and Larry were frantically searching for JJ and Tylee. And per Annie, Kay quickly said that she couldn't deal with that right now because she was too busy trying to find JJ, and who could blame Kay for that? Kay is also a shero of this story. But then Annie didn't have a chance to ask Kay to clarify exactly what she meant. Did she mean that she thought or believed it was possible Lori and Alex unalived Joe? Or did she mean she knew for a fact that they did that? I'm hoping that now that she's gotten justice for Charles, maybe Kay can have that discussion with Annie Cushing to let her know why she said that. I'm hoping any family upsets can finally be pushed aside. Everyone can understand that the stakes were very high, that feelings were very raw, that it's hard to hear some things that might not be flattering about Charles. But Annie Cushing is very analytical, and she looks at the facts and she looks at the timeline, and she doesn't just come up with stuff out of the blue. You know, Joe had moved from Texas to be near Tylee in Arizona, and he'd only been there for a short time when he suddenly died. And then we see Lori profiting off his death through his life insurance and the Social Security benefits for Tylee. It's the same pattern she used with Charles Vallow, and the same pattern that Chad Daybell used with his wife, Tammy Daybell. We also know that Lori's sister, Summer Shiflett, texted Lori before Charles was unalived, saying that if he did that, I'll unalive him for you, or I'll help. Again, you know, we don't know, but it does look like Summer had some inkling of maybe what was going to go down. I do feel that the Cox family as a whole has a dubious relationship with morality. I shouldn't say the family as a whole. Let's just say some of the members. It's been said that Lori's father, Barry, had practiced law despite not having a law degree. They made it sound like he was something of a con man. Certainly, Alex didn't seem to have any problems using weapons to unalive people. Lori appears to be a pathological liar, and clearly she paved the way for a lot of people's deaths. And she continues to make up lies and stories to try to say she didn't know anything about Charles being unalived. She didn't plan it with Alex. Melanie Boudreaux, now Pulowski, definitely seems to have had information about what was going to go down. Remember, she divorced her husband, Brandon Boudreaux, and then suddenly he's getting bullets sent his way out of a Jeep that was Tylee's, likely with Alex Cox inside. By the way, Adam Cox and Kay Woodcock have both said that there's nothing anybody can tell them that will convince them that Alex's sudden death the day before Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed was natural. Adam said maybe Alex did that to himself by taking poison, or perhaps his new bride, Zulema, who was knee-deep in Lori and Chad's religious beliefs, could have maybe given him something, maybe. Even if Alex had blood clots, high blood pressure, clogged arteries, it's possible that he could have ingested something that prompted the blood clots. We know that Lori purchased malachite wedding rings for her and Chad using Charles Vallow's credit card and Amazon account. Malachite can be toxic if ingested, inhaled, or absorbed in large quantities. Dust from grinding malachite is apparently very dangerous. So, was Zulema maybe paid by Lori or promised some of the $1 million in life insurance for giving Alex some malachite secretly? Pure speculation, but maybe it happened like that. Maybe it was because she was promised a special role in Lori and Chad's religious circle. Zulema was reportedly considered a spiritual authority and a healer among the group. Chad Daybell gave her the title of Protector of the Portal. Lori and Chad also believed that Zulema had the ability to call upon elements like fire, water, and lightning during rituals. And of course, Zulema was also involved in the group's castings, which were rituals designed to rid people of evil or dark spirits. Here's what's so shocking about this whole thing. Well, there's so many things that are shocking. Lori and Chad were equally unhinged and delusional, in my opinion. And it's not really surprising that these two narcissists came together. And that's because they were both into the whole doomsday thing, the preparing the people thing. That drew Lori to a conference where Chad was speaking. Chad, of course, found Lori quite tempting. He seemed to find her very attractive, and he let her know quickly that they were married in a previous life. In the end, it seems that it was money, maybe even more than their twisted religious ideas, that spurred Chad and Lori to go on this murderous spree. They wanted to be together. They needed to be rid of their spouses, and the money was going to show up from the life insurance from those two spouses. Neither Lori nor Chad seemed capable or willing to go out and get a job that would pay for their life together and the lifestyle that Lori was accustomed to, because Charles Vallow was a very hard-working and successful man, from what I can see, for the most part. That's all for today. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, consider a membership or a Patreon, and I will see you next time on Bed Crime Stories.